So thank you, Pastor Chad, and I'm certainly grateful to be here with all of y'all this evening. I appreciate the praise team playing and leading us in just a time of just worship. And so, you know, the Bible talks about loving the Lord our God with all of our heart, all of our soul, all of our mind, and all of our strength. And so tonight, it will be a little bit different from maybe what I would normally do at a conference. It's not really a sermon this evening. It's more of a lecture. But we're going to love the Lord our God with our mind tonight. I believe there's a great quote that said, the scandal of the evangelical mind is there's not much of an evangelical mind. Right? And so, you know, we really need, I think, to recapture in the church, as well as the academy, if you will, loving the Lord our God with our minds as well. And so my topic this evening that was kind of assigned, kind of chosen, Chad threw out several, kind of lobbed them out there to us, and I jumped on the one that immediately stood out to me, being this dialogue, if you will, or a tension between naturalism and Christianity, and how best it explains, which one best explains for us how we are most human. And so, kind of where I want to go tonight is to kind of raise a dialogue about the human experience. A dialogue between a naturalist and a Christian. So I want just to begin our time with a question, and to get you thinking about the way that we're going to go this evening. And the question is this: how does our culture define the origin and the purpose of humanity, of us? How does our culture define the origin and purpose of humanity? Some people would say it's like this. This is the meaning of life. Eat, avoid bad people, and jump to the next level. Like, that is all of what life is about. It's just simple, rote, natural processes. Just get as much as you can, buy as much as you can, eat as much as you can. Just avoid evil at all costs. Avoid bad people, and maybe you'll get to level up, you know, to the next level. So we do understand, I think fundamentally, we understand that there's a difference between humanity and the natural creation or the natural order of things. For instance, with, you know, us as humans. So my favorite commentator or theologian, Ron Swanson, would say this: mankind, do animals have multiple ways to cook us? No. We have multiple ways to cook animals. Right? So there is a difference, a fundamental difference, if you will, between us, as we would say, as Christians, humans created and made in the image of God, and the animal kingdom or creation, which is a creation of God, but it is not like God. So it's important to begin if we think about how we might define our terms. Okay, so I think that's important as we think about any sort of lecture, any sort of topic. And I'm going to define the term naturalism for you, so we're both on the same page. Naturalism is the belief that only natural forces or laws operate in the world. And it's often as opposed to a supernatural or a spiritual focus. So a naturalist, a true naturalist, would say, look, only natural laws operate in the world. There is no supernatural realm. There's no supernatural order. There is no God, is what they would say. And so many of you grew up, I mean, by show of hands, some of you grew up knowing about this man, Carl Sagan. And you remember his show, Cosmos, right? And you know, what he said is the cosmos, he says, is within us. Interesting, he says, we're made of star stuff. Whatever that means. We are the way for the cosmos to know itself. Whether you realize it or not, Carl Sagan was not just a scientist, but he was the leader of a religion. Very much so. He was a preacher of the worship of the universe. This would be the pinnacle example of what a naturalist would be like. If you could paint a naturalist, he would look an awful lot like probably Carl Sagan. And so tonight, what I want to do is raise a possible scenario, a dialogue about the human experience between a naturalist and a Christian over a cup of coffee. Because, you know, we're polite when we're drinking coffee with one another, right? So we want to create a polite, sort of friendly dialogue that might occur between a naturalist and a Christian. And so what this will do, there'll be kind of three main points, if you will. Three main points of contention between these two people. Or you might say it this way. There are three areas, fundamental foundational areas, where a naturalist and a Christian are going to land and disagree. Okay? And so these are the areas of knowledge, in the area of morality, and then the area of the miraculous, or the supernatural. So let's dive in tonight to talk about knowledge, or sometimes you'll see this referred to as, in the formal term, epistemology. So consider the following exchange as the coffee begins to be poured. The naturalist says, as the coffee is pouring into the cup, "Well, Christian belief or faith is inadequate because the evidence does not bear it out factually." And then the Christian, as he starts to take his coffee and pour his coffee, says, "Well, no, naturalist, you see, it is possible to believe in God without having any evidence." So there's a tension you see there. There's a tension between the naturalist, which says the only way that we can truly know something is based upon scientific evidence. The only way that you and I can know objective truth, objective reality, is if we can measure it. The Christian would say, well, that's not the case. You can actually have belief in God without having any evidence at all. And so I want to give you some arguments against sort of what we might call rote sort of factualism, evidentialism, right? And so what would be the arguments against that? Well, one, you and I believe that an external world exists without having any evidence. I told you you're going to put on your thinking caps tonight. Okay? What do you mean? Here, let me give you a possible scenario. How do you know right now, sitting here, that you are not the product of an evil genius who is deluding you into believing that there really is an external world? That would be Matrix theology, the old Matrix trilogy, right? That you're plugged in somewhere as a battery, and you're in sort of some kind of simulated reality and some simulated game. Well, see, belief in the external world is not a foundational fact, and it's not derivable. But we'll not just abandon this belief, right? We'll not just abandon the belief that we're not all walking around in a simulation, right? We all believe that the world exists, it's real, I'm in it, you're in it, right? If you don't have that, if you're walking around thinking that the self is all that can be known or ever exist, that's called solipsism, right? And that makes you the center of the universe, and you're the only real thing, and everything else is just fictitious. You know how you fix a solipsist? You walk up and punch them in the face. Right? Because it's true that I exist, and you exist, and the external world exists without any external evidence that we have. Secondly, you and I take for granted without any evidence, we believe in the past. We believe in the past. How would you prove that you believe in the past? Well, like we all have, look, we all have iPhones or some sort of Android phone, right? I could prove that in the past, look, so I could pull up on my phone and say, look, on Saturday, I was in Chicago, right? In the past. I have proof. I could pull out a photograph and show you. I didn't simulate this. I don't think I downloaded it off the internet and faked it, right? In fact, there's a picture. No, there's me, right? I didn't craft myself into it. I could say, look, I've got a photograph to believe that the past exists. And beyond that, we've got newsreels, things such of that nature. I mean, how do you know? You just didn't pop into existence a moment ago with all your memories intact. No. Belief in the past is not derivable. It's not evidential. Except we know it like without that. Here's the final one. Arguments against rote factualism, belief in other people's minds. You believe, have you ever had this moment? You believe that you are self-aware. Isn't it weird? Like you have this fundamental, you're walking around and all of a sudden you go, oh, I exist. Isn't that odd? It's very strange. So we don't look at objects around us, other people around us, and perceive that they are not conscious. How do you know that a person has a mind? How do we know that, like, how do I know that Josh Tanner is not a robot? I mean, he might be. How do I know? Even after testing it, right? Like we could test it, I still couldn't be sure that he's just not some fancy sort of Terminator from the future sent to pass to teach us about what real worship is about, right? How can I be really sure? Even if you could, like, we would do this, but even if we could open the top of Josh's head and look at his brain and see it functioning with him all awake and stuff, right? We would do that. That would be weird, right? But we still couldn't go, well, he has a mind. See, you and I believe that other people have a mind. It's not derivable, right? There's something that makes this sort of evidential house sort of collapse. If someone says that belief in God, if the naturalist would say, look, belief in God is defective, like something is wrong with you because you don't have any evidence for it, the right response is to say, well, then explain to me what your view of knowledge is. How do you know what you know? See, what they will want to do is treat these three foundational beliefs as factual. Our response should be, then why isn't belief in God okay there? If we can believe in these things without evidence, why wouldn't belief in God be objective? Why did these get a pass? Why does supernaturalism not get a pass? Look, here's why they don't get a pass. Because simply everybody knows them to be true. You see, the reality is that 95% of humanity on the face of planet Earth believe that there is a supernatural element to the universe, whether they are Hindu, Islamic, or Christian, or some other version. The only people who disbelieve the supernatural are those who have been programmed not to believe it by their culture. If you leave people to themselves, and if you just leave them alone, if you leave them to themselves, they will always come to believe in some sort of supernatural reality. This is why Alvin Plantinga, the great philosopher, can say that it is possible to believe in the existence of God without having any evidence. This is why missionaries, let's just make it practical, could go into these tribal areas that have been secluded and find them worshiping creation. And we go, aha! God said something about that in Romans 1. Or the stories of many missionaries who go into a secluded place in the world where the gospel has never penetrated. Right? And the people come out to meet them and they say, you're here to tell us about Jesus. How do you know about Jesus? I had a dream and a vision. And he told me you would be here. See, it happens all the time. Look, it's true that knowledge, there's an intersection. They're not separate. There's an intersection between knowledge, epistemology, and the study of God. They're not separate. It's not like you have to have knowledge over here objectively and have God over here with just rote faith like you're putting your brain in your pocket. How do we know this? Well, look. Here's what theology tells us. We are made to know. Turn to Psalm 139 with me real quick tonight. God has made us to know. And He knows us. You know this psalm very well. O Lord, you have searched me and you've known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up, you discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down. You are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's too high. I cannot contain it. Where shall I go from your spirit? Where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be as night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for darkness is as light with you. For you formed my inward parts, you knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet were not one of them. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. If I would count them, they are more than the sand. I awake, and I am still with you. Look, friends, we are made to know God because He knows us. We're not only made to know, we are situated to know. One of my favorite Psalms, Psalm 19, says it this way: the heavens are declaring the glory of God. Day by day, the heavens pour forth speech. Right? We are perfectly situated in the universe to know things. Like where the earth sits on its axis makes it even possible for astronomy to exist. If we were just a little bit further or a little bit further away, a little bit closer to the sun or a little bit further away, it would all be over. But we're situated just perfectly at just the right tilt for us to look up, see the heavens, and marvel and wonder at the beauty and the awe of what God has made. I just mentioned this in Romans 1. Thirdly, natural revelation allows us to know. It allows us to know inside each one of us is the knowledge that we are made by God. This is why people worship the creation rather than the Creator. Natural relation allows us to know, but praise the Lord, He hasn't left us there. He's given us His Word. He's given us special revelation, right? His special revelation to us, His revealed Word, is given for us to what? To know. Know what? To know the gospel. To know Him. To know that we have a Creator. To know that we're not accidents. I want to just kind of illustrate this about knowledge and how knowledge is increasing. Some of you may recognize this is just a strand in artistic rendering of DNA. Okay? Let me tell you a story about Dean H. Kenyon and another guy you might know, Charles Darwin. Now, you surely are heard of Charles Darwin, but you probably have not heard of Dean Kenyon. Kenyon is a professor emeritus of biology at San Francisco State, known for his work specifically with DNA. See, Darwin explained the theory of life on Earth. He described it often as a tree with many branches. However, when it comes to the base of the tree, Darwin doesn't say a lot. See, Darwin lived out on the branches, not at the source. In other words, Darwin didn't address how life could form out of non-living matter. See, what Darwin would say is that it could have happened out of the primordial waters of the early earth. Now, this was taken to the next step and became known as chemical evolution.
And so Kenyon comes along, and Kenyon thinks that he has the answer to Darwin's question. How can life on Earth begin through a purely natural process? So in order to explain this, Kenyon had to do something. He had to explain the existence of something in our bodies. Proteins. The basic building blocks of life. See, what do proteins do? They do all the jobs in the cell except for storing genetic info. Even simple cells are made up of thousands of different types of proteins. Proteins have a sort of a hand sort of in the glove fit with other proteins in the cell. Proteins themselves are made up of smaller chains called amino acids. Right? Scientists have explained amino acids by connecting, as a way of kind of like connecting the letters of the alphabet. In other words, they arrange the right way, they create a text that is readable in our bodies. When arranged the right way, the amino acid will function as a protein by folding itself into a certain structure that serves a specific function. Kenyon calls this, interesting enough, it's almost like a theological term. He calls it biochemical predestination. Sounds interesting, sounds theological. He says life was predestined simply by chemistry. The attraction of amino acids chemically to one another to form functioning proteins. Yet, 5 years after his initial research came out, Kenyon began to doubt his own theory. How could he wonder? How could the first proteins, the very first ones, have been formed without specific genetic instructions? So what he discovered was that proteins couldn't self-assemble without DNA. The chemical code you see, my friends, in DNA is called the code of life. It is the most complex chemical language in the world. Kenyon could not explain how such a thing could form out of the primordial, primitive ocean. Further study would show later that amino acids don't even have the ability to order themselves without genetic information. So by the 70s, the 1970s, most researchers rejected Kenyon's initial findings. And so, just to illustrate this, I have this is a bag of Scrabble letters. Okay? Y'all like Scrabble, right? So imagine, if you will, okay? Like if Kenyon was right, okay? And proteins could form on their own a readable code out of the primordial ocean. It would be a little bit like taking this bag of Scrabble pieces, right? And taking it out on a table down here, and this happened. And saying, okay, what do we want? We want 2 lines from Hamlet. Okay? It's not there. Right? I mean, there might be, you could say, well, no. I can't even, it's not going to read, it's never going to, no matter how many times you do the experiment, it's never going to, like, randomly on its own form to be or not to be. That is the question. Which implies what, friends? You're designed. You're made. Isn't it amazing how, as science advances, Psalm 139 becomes clear? It's amazing that you and I are not only known by God, but He makes Himself known through the way He's designed each one. So as the coffee begins to be sipped a little bit, the dialogue continues and morality comes up. And the naturalist might say this: moral laws, morality, is a fluke. It's a result of a genetic mutation that went wrong in us. And the Christian will say, wait a minute. No. Let me drink my coffee. Let me get a sip. Let me tell you, morality is not part of our genetic code. For example, consider altruistic behavior. We'll come back to that in just a It's here that if I were dialoguing with a road naturalist in a friendly sort of way, I would probably bring up one of my favorite philosopher theologians of all time, C.S. Lewis. And I would bring up C.S. Lewis's mere Christianity argument for a moral standard. So let me give you this in just a brief way tonight. So Lewis will say this about morality. People will often quarrel over matters of conduct. Lewis likes to italicize that word quarrel, to make it almost like it's a technical term in his work. He gets us thinking about quarreling over morality. And so whenever there's a debate about morality and two people disagree about it, right? That's always made between two people, what does that imply? That implies that there's a standard that they're disagreeing upon. If there is disagreement about morality between two people, that doesn't imply they're doing that in isolation. What brings about the disagreement? The existence of a moral standard. So people quarrel about matters of conduct all the time. Secondly, the moral standard appears to be cross-cultural, transcultural. The moral standard, Lewis will say, exists across time and space. So if you would change the culture that you live in, the standard of morality, the standard will not change. To go back in time or to go forward in time, you're not going to discover a different standard of morality. What you will see is a dispute over the facts about morality. That people rationalize from principles to justify their actions. So, as an example, standards for relationships and the displaying of relationships is very different in America, for instance, versus Thailand. Right? So, in Thailand, if you're in a relationship with a guy and a girl, right? You're in a relationship and you're in public. The only thing you will ever do to show your relationship is you're with someone is you will hold their hand. In Thailand, there is no, like, arm around the shoulder, right? There is no, we're in a rural area, there is no riding in the truck and the girl is in the middle seat, right? There is no sort of kissing in public in Thailand between a guy and a girl, right? Yet we in America, we've all been like at the movie theater or like out somewhere in public and we're like, wow. Wow. Would you all just stop? This is really, really uncomfortable. We see just because Thailand has a different standard for morality with relationships and how it's displayed than we do, doesn't imply that the standard doesn't exist. We've just appropriated it differently. Thirdly, the standard cannot be equated with social instinct. See, morality, I don't know if you've thought about this a lot, I have, that morality doesn't quite strike me as instinctual. See, morality often flies in the face of what instinctually we want to do. So this is true, right? You don't always feel like doing the right thing, do you? No. See, morality is not a product of blind, naturalistic evolution. That is, morality is not part of our genetic code. This is what the naturalists will say. People say, look, it's a fluke. It's a genetic mutation. It served its purpose because it caused us to be more social and thus to survive in greater numbers over time. That's the naturalistic account for morality. They say morality is this hallucination that we are under. Well, back to altruistic behavior for just a moment. Under a naturalistic system, it becomes very hard to account for the person that dives into the lake to save somebody that they don't know, that they've never met. Altruistic behavior. See, instinctually, we would want to go preservation. Okay, survival of the fittest. No one would, like if you were standing next to somebody on a lake on a beach and someone was drowning, and someone was standing next to you and they said, well, it's a good day for me because survival of the fittest. They're going to drown and I'm going to live. That means more for me and less for them. You would go, I'm going to get them. right? I'm going out into the lake. And it would even probably be so for a complete stranger, like a person I've never met. I always said to my students this way, it's like, I'm not sort of wired to do the right thing. If we were out camping, like as a class, and my daughter Claire went with me, she's 13, she's cute, she's wonderful, she's kind of sassy, right? But like if she were with me and a bear came out of the woods, right? I might be tempted to trip you and take Claire our way. Why? Because I'm preserving my daughter, right? I'd be tempted to do that. But under altruistic behavior, it would be like this. Everyone run, I've got the bear. That's altruistic behavior. Naturalism cannot account for that in its theory. Fourthly, the evidential value of morality cannot be downgraded because of experience. You can't discount morality, for instance, just because you were taught by your parents. I hope you were. Just because you were taught by your parents that there is a moral law doesn't discount the supernatural aspect of morality. Just take 2 + 2 = 4, for instance. Just because you were taught by your parents, hopefully you were taught math the right way, just because you were taught with your parents, 2 + 2 = 4. When you grow up and sort of, become more sort of self-aware, you don't sort of shuck that. You don't somehow go, well, math is unconventional and unimportant now, and 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4. Just because you were taught it by your parents, right? Some of the things that we learn by experience are grounded in objective truth. Like no one goes outside and looks up and sees the Big Dipper out in the sky and goes, that's not real. Because look, I learned it when I was young from a textbook, but now that I've grown, it's just not real. We'd go, you're crazy. Right? Morality cannot be downgraded because of experience. Look, fifthly, if there's no natural explanation for morality, it logically follows there must be a supernatural one for it. And look, finally, the content of a moral standard is propositional. So the source of morality must be an intelligent mind, and friends, the best explanation for that is God. Since the content of morality is information at its core, knowledge, then our awareness of it comes through intelligence. Think about this with me tonight. Where does information come from? Where does information come from? It doesn't come from non-intelligent beings. So we hope not. Listen, your dog, for instance. Your dog, as wonderful as your dog is never going to look at you and articulate for you the reason why you should take him to the hospital because he just swallowed a sock. Your dog's never going to do that. If he does, come see Pastor Chad. It's time for counseling. Right? Information comes from intelligent beings. Therefore, the source of our morality has to be an intelligent mind, a mind much further beyond and far above our finite abilities, and the best explanation for such a being is God. It's funny how the Bible, again, in Isaiah says, "For my thoughts are higher than your thoughts," says the Lord. "For my ways are higher than your ways." Finally tonight, after one final refill of coffee, the conversation takes, what might be an expected turn towards the question of miracles. The naturalists would say, look, miracles do not occur because they would overthrow the foundation of natural laws. And the Christian would say, look, okay, a miracle claim is not a contradiction to natural law. It's an exception to it. So one of the most famous philosophers who tried to contradict miracles was a guy named David Hume. He lived from 1711 to 1776. He wrote an essay entitled Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding. It's really the standard philosophical sort of argument against the miraculous. So this is what David Hume said about miracles. Here's how he tried to refute it. He would make an argument from uniform human experience. Here's what he would say. Hume would say, we know that the natural law is that things that are, for instance, that are heavier, they sink in water, right? We call this uniform human experience. Uniform human experience. It implies that different things don't ever happen. Yet we have in the Bible a couple of instances where heavier things don't sink in water. One in the Old Testament and one in the New Testament. In the Old Testament, we have, remember, the axe head that floats in the water. In the New Testament, we have a man, a God-man, who walks on the water. So Hume would look at that and go, that can't be possible because uniform human experience is such that when you take a rock and throw it in water, it always sinks. Secondly, Hume will say, well, this calls us the argument from primitive knowledge. Hume specifically directs his ire against the Bible. He will want to say, look, these miracles that occur, that they're describing, they occur among what he calls pre-scientific people. We call them pre-enlightenment people. Right? He says, if only they had done some elementary lab work, they would have seen that these miracles surely didn't occur. Right? Then Hume will finally say what he calls the argument from competing worldviews. Hume will also say that you have all these different worldviews, religions, all of which claim that miracles do occur. Hume will say that since these worldviews are contradictory to one another, then you're obligated as a Christian to believe that 3/4 of the occurrences of miracles in the Bible do not occur. So for Hume, that really strengthens his argument as what he would call himself a skeptic. So how would we answer that? Let's just say our friendly naturalist brought up David Hume and said, look, uniform human experience teaches us that miracles don't occur. Dead people don't get up out of the grave. Right? Or that, look, we're more scientific than they were. Right? Or that, look, there are miracles attested in all of the worldviews and they're contradictory. What would we say to that? So the first thing we say is God is the unknown X factor, which allows for the negation of uniform human experience. Listen, if we put the natural law on trial, and if we called in the witnesses, we would have a line of witnesses that would be overwhelming. With Jesus walking on water, you have 12 people who tell you something different than uniform human experience. Right? 12 people. 12 very different people who didn't always agree. You read the Bible? They're always arguing with one another. They're arguing which one's the greatest. Right? Hume will say that, well, since you aren't there, you're faced with the question, which should you believe? Hume will say that you should believe billions of people versus these 12. Well, if we're just going to play the numbers, there's a little something that Paul says in 1 Corinthians about the resurrection. He says Jesus was raised from the dead, and he says he appeared to these people. And then he goes on to say he appeared to more than 500 people, most of whom remained until this day. What's Paul trying to tell you? How much would be enough if you believe that Jesus really rose from the dead? Like, how many would it take for you if you were a skeptic? And you'd heard about this man from Galilee who had been crucified brutally on the cross, scourged and beaten and ripped open beyond even compare, placed in a cold, dark, empty tomb, and suddenly he's gone. And then his followers begin to say, he's alive. Just play the scenario that you're skeptical. How many would it take? You go to the first door. Hey, I've heard that you've seen Jesus alive. Tell me, what did you see? Well, he was physical. I hugged him. Oh, you mean you didn't pass right through him? He wasn't spirit? No, I hugged him and embraced him. Okay. So you start to scratch your head a little bit. Maybe the skepticism is going away. And you go to the second door. Excuse me, I've heard that you saw Jesus raised from the dead. And the person's like, yeah, we ate a meal together. Okay, so when he ate, did like the food just float out of him? No, he ate the fish, and it was all good. He burped afterwards, it was great. Right? So he's flesh and bone. Oh yeah. See, for us it would be like, how many would it take before the evidence, the dump truck of evidence would go, okay. How many would it take? 3, 7, 464. See, the natural law will tell you about something, all other things being equal. But listen, friends, when God is the factor in the equation, the natural law may not be applicable in that case. Secondly, the amount of knowledge needed to validate a miracle is exaggerated. The response is that Hume exaggerates the amount of knowledge a person needs to validate the miracle did occur. Think about this, like, how much knowledge did Joseph need in order to believe that Mary was pregnant? Right? I mean, just think about Joseph. Joseph's predisposition was to think about natural ways babies are formed, right? True? Even though he wasn't a trained medical doctor. The angel did have to appear to him to tell him it was a miracle. And then he believed. That's not a lot of knowledge. Hey, Joseph, the wife is pregnant. Don't be afraid. The child is of the Holy Spirit. Don't be afraid to take her as your wife. And Joseph's like, okay. He doesn't need a lot of evidence. Look, you can have agreement. Look, you can have agreement that other worldviews experience the miraculous. Hume once again exaggerates the amount of knowledge needed to validate that a miracle did occur. Here's the way we can think about this. Okay? The account of the miraculous in, let me just take Islam for just a moment. This past weekend in Chicago, I was with a friend of mine who was writing his PhD dissertation about the angel Gabriel in Islam. Very fascinating. Right? And he's doing Islamic studies at Southern Seminary. And so he's writing about the angel Gabriel, how the angel Gabriel appears in Islam. Because the angel Gabriel is the one that supposedly appears to Muhammad and gives him the Quran, dictates the Quran. So he's done an analysis where he takes all of the literature written about angels and written about demons, and he created a list of 14 characteristics of angels and 14 characteristics of demons. And he compared the angel Gabriel to that list, and here's what he came out with, statistically. The angel Gabriel in the Quran, 70% more in common with the demonic than with the angelic. What does that tell you? That it may very well be possible that Muhammad did have a supernatural experience, but he wasn't talking to an angel, he was talking to a demon. You see where, apologetically, where that might go. And that's biblical, right? We read in the Bible, in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, do not be surprised if even Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. Gabriel in the Quran strikes fear into people. He seems to revel in the fact that people are afraid of him. Whereas Gabriel, the angel in the Bible that we read about in God's Word, often the first words out of his mouth are, do not be afraid. Look, we don't need to discount the fact that the miraculous may occur in other worldviews because of the influence of the demonic. So tonight, if we were wrapping this conversation up, I think there's some implications tonight for us as human beings. I just want to leave you with some thoughts tonight. The first is this. Naturalism can never satisfy the human experience of longing to be known. That is your identity. Naturalism can never answer the question, who am I? Who am I? Who do I belong to? What is my purpose? Where am I going? If you just stick with naturalism, it's going nowhere. As a Christian, here is what we know. My identity is in Christ. I'm clothed with Him. We hear familial terms in the Bible. I am His child. I am a son. I am an heir. All of these give meaning and purpose to who we are. Naturalism can never bring you. It can only bring you to a place where the logical outworking is hopelessness. Secondly, naturalism can never produce morality within the human experience. You're just a naturalist, biological processes. You're never going to arrive at a true morality. You're never going to arrive at the answer to the question, why ought you to obey? Why ought you to obey? And the Bible gives us the answers to that question. We obey, we are moral beings, not because it earns us any sort of favor with God, but because of our outworking of our relationship with God. It's Ephesians 2:10, right, folks? Created in Christ Jesus. We are His workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, prepared beforehand that we might walk in them. Why ought you to obey? Because you are not your own, you're bought with price. Naturalism, see, can never answer that. Finally, I believe this. Naturalism can never provide beauty or wonder in the human experience. If all we see outside of us are natural processes, biological processes, then the wonder and the beauty and the awe that we feel doesn't really exist. What you feel, in other words, would be an illusion. See, God has situated us in His creation in such a way that we look outside of us, outside of ourselves, and we marvel at what we see before our eyes. No one stands at the rim of the Grand Canyon and goes, "Go evolution." Woo! Way to evolve natural processes. No, we take a picture of it with our phone and we post it on Instagram and no filter, and we're like, beauty of God's creation. Not to mention if you've ever truly encountered the miraculous, something you couldn't ever explain that happened, that only you can explain with God's the fact. Naturalism can never bring you there. Friends, look, God wants to know you, and He wants to be known. Christianity provides that path. It provides a reason why we ought to do the things that we do. And look, it gives meaning to what we see around us, the people that are before us that are made in God's image. It gives beauty and awe and wonder. It allows me to treat other people not as objects, but as God's subjects. Naturalism can never, ever do that. Let me pray for us as we move into a time of discussion and further worship here. Father, thank you for your truth tonight. We thank you that we can know you, and we can be known by you. You haven't left us groping in the dark for meaning, for purpose, for significance about our identity. But truly our identity is found in Jesus Christ. We thank you tonight, Lord, that you produce in us works of a sort that cause us to do good to others. As your word says, to enable us to love our neighbors as ourselves. Father, we thank you for the awe and the beauty and the wonder of what you've made. From creation, what we see around us, to people that are made in your image. Help us to resist the tendencies that our culture pushes us towards evolution, towards naturalism. Help us instead to turn our eyes to you, from where we find our significance and our meaning. And so we pray these things, trusting that you'll apply them to our lives tonight.